welcome back to Identity's 5th tutorial. In this particular video, I'm going to be discussing how to create lighting and depth within your images. Alright, so I have an image already open in Photoshop, but as you can see here, the image is a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is actually scale this image down a bit. Remember, when you guys scale down images, always hold down the shift key as it keeps the proportions in check. Okay, so now that I have finished scaling down my image, the next thing I'm going to do is actually select the scaled down image layer and then go to my edits tab and cut it. Now I'm going to create a new canvas and paste the cut image onto it. Now, there are several different methods in which one may create depth or lighting in Photoshop. The first method, as I previously discussed, is by using adjustment layers such as brightness and contrast. The drawback of using an adjustment layer is that it affects the entire image as a whole as opposed to specific portions of it. So there's not as much versatility as opposed to manually doing it. But it is definitely better than adding an adjustment onto the layer itself. Alright, so the image as of now shows a very strong contrast between the woman and the background she's placed upon. We want to eliminate this contrast by actually blending the woman to her surroundings. So we want to actually create a darker atmosphere. So what I'm going to do is actually create a new layer and fill that layer with the color black. So as of now, the only thing we can see is black. We're going to fix that by lowering the opacity of that black layer to 7%. Messing around with the opacity levels is one of the better ways in which one may retain a specific effect without making it too overpowering. Okay, so now since we created a darker atmosphere, we're actually going to create a lighter atmosphere. This actually makes the contrast a little bit more balanced as opposed to the original image. So for lighter atmospheres, we actually use the same process as for darker atmospheres, but we change the color to white. Okay, there seems to be a little bit of a stronger contrast between the darker and the lighter atmospheres. So what we want to do is actually balance that. When balancing atmospheres, you actually want to use the dominant color within the image. So as you can see here, I have chosen a murky green. The green as of right now is very solid. So we want to actually fix that by going to our filters tab at the top, dropping down to Gaussian blur, and then scaling up the Gaussian blur all the way up. So this eliminates the very rough outlook the green gives off and makes it a lot more transparent or softer. As I mentioned earlier, adjusting the opacity levels is a good trick, but it's not the only trick for retaining an effect. For example, blending options. You can even combine blending options and adjusting opacity levels to create a more unique effect. Now, I know that I mentioned that adjustment layers aren't exactly the best method for creating atmospheres, but they are actually a pretty good finishing method. Now, as you can see here, I'm going to stack up on color balance and brightness and contrast adjustment layers. And there you have it for basic lighting and depth. The next thing I'm going to show you guys is how to create light sources. Okay, so create a new layer and bring it on top of all your adjustment layers. The next thing you're going to do is actually select your brush tool, make sure that the color is set on white, and brush around. As far as knowing where to implement brushes, it's more of an acquired trait, so you're going to have to practice that a little bit more. But for a general rule of thumb, add light sources where there is already light present. So after you are done implementing your brushing, I want you to go to your filters tab, drop down, and select Gaussian blur. You actually want to jack up the strength of the Gaussian blur filter by about 94.6 to the point where the white brushes are no longer in strong contrast with the background and they sort of blend in more now. And there you have it. You have just successfully created a light source. Now this technique can be used for many other things besides creating light sources. You can even use this technique to blend and create a stronger atmosphere. So now I'm going to actually show you guys my most preferred method for creating depth and lighting. The burn tool enhances darker areas while the dodge tool heightens lighter areas, which overall creates a more dynamic contrast between lighter and darker areas within your image. Knowing where to burn and dodge is much like knowing where to add a light source. It's an acquired trait and it takes time to develop. But a general rule of thumb is to basically dodge lighter areas and burn darker areas. Also, when you are working with the burning and dodge tools, you generally want to keep a very low strength. So I would recommend anything from 6 to about 17%, but nothing higher. And there you have it, your edited image with increased lighting and depth. And this concludes Identity's Fit tutorial. Also, just a reminder that we are still holding those random Facebook raffles in which you may enter to win free gear. Thanks for watching, remember to subscribe, and see you next time.